Hello and welcome back to the ARC Hive Podcast. And today's episode, I am so glad you are here for. We are going to recap season two. And I think for me, what season two really means is it's been a season of hearing the power of story, talking about leadership, and as always, continuing to develop and embracing our hive. So I am so glad you are here. Let's dive into this. So, season two, I always think it is so important to reflect on where we've been, where we've come from, and where we're going. And for me, that reflection of season two has been my mission has been to continue to bring real conversations to light, doing that through stories of life, leadership, movement, and of course, meaningful connection. And I think we've done that really well this season. I think we have heard some really incredible stories. We've heard from some amazing leaders doing such great things in this world. And I think for me, hearing all of their stories, there was something so relatable in all of those stories that really, really left an impact this season. So, along with me, I hope you take a little moment if you've been listening all season long to go to reflect on, who left that little imprint on your heart or your soul with the conversation and the story. Who was that for you, or what was the takeaway? I think for me in this season came out of really from me attending ROI, which really put me outside my comfort zone. Totally outside my comfort zone. I've shared that throughout, but it also really reminded me is why storytelling really matters in leadership. No matter who or what you're leading, it really matters in how we tell the story. And hearing the story, also listening to the story is just important. And the stories that we tell help shape who we are, but they also help shape how we lead. And I think, again, we maybe don't take enough time to reflect on that about how we are telling the story, how we are leading, being a little bit more mindful to that. And I also love looking to others and seeing how they lead and how could I incorporate that into my own leadership. And I think this season brought some really incredible women to do that. I also want to really talk about the importance and the value of hearing women speak their truth in entrepreneurship. Not just entrepreneurship, but underneath that perhaps is community. We also talked about some hard things this season, like grief and vision. And there are so many opportunities to learn from that. Again, what could you take away for you that you can apply into your own business, leadership, whatever that is? And, there's so I feel like podcasts are what just this wonderful opportunity, and it's such a privilege to be in your ear, but it's also like this wonderful opportunity to kind of get like these bite-size learning moments. And how great is that we have that literally at our disposal, at our fingertips and into our ear. Um, I want to share, I think something that really stood out for me was when you share your story, you create permission for others to step into theirs. And I hope you really hear this. This is something that I have said is that really when you share your story, you create permission for the person next to you or those others in the room to step into theirs and share their story. And again, that is where I think there's so much magic in the learning and the takeaways. And I hope that I hope this season has given you that permission to share your story, and perhaps giving you an awareness of how can you help others rise to share their story. So it's just been, I really feel like, a really great season. It has been so exciting to um, chat with these women and bring these incredible entrepreneurs to you. So let's kind of do a little recap, guest by guest, some key takeaways I thought for me for this season. And I would, of course, I always love to hear yours. So please don't be afraid to drop them in a comment and let us know what your takeaway is. So if we go back to our season, the kicking off the season and talking about, the ROI, and instead of return on investment, which is what really like brought this season to light, was flipping that to the return on intention. We really talked about, reflecting on what we want back from our efforts, and not just solely on income, but rather also on alignment, joy, and clarity. And I can tell you, when you really like turn up the ROI in return on intention, there is this beautiful ripple effect that also affects your bottom line and your return on investment. That the intention is the energy that then can actually expand and elevate your investment. So, like I said, ROI pushed me outside my comfort zone, but it taught me so much about being outside that comfort zone, was where I know I really grow and I learn. And it's brought for me, what I'm going to take into 2026 is challenging myself to make sure I am putting myself in situations that make me uncomfortable. The uncomfortable is okay. If I can recognize that it's fear, you can recognize the fear and you're walking through it. But what if on the other side it was better than you expected? And for me, ROI, whether it's intention or investment, was um, far better than I could have ever imagined. And then, we chatted with, of course, my business bestie, Carrie Miller Schmatzny. We talked about the business bestie, and we talked about creative collaboration. And, Carrie has been such a dear friend to me. I love to collaborate with her at any opportunity, but really having that business bestie um, as you're an entrepreneur is so important. It also, that allows you to have, it allows really entrepreneurship to be more sustainable and fun when you have a creative energy match, where someone that you can totally trust, who shows up for you in the good and the bad and everything in between, and but allows you really to bounce those ideas off one another, allows you, pushes you, right, allows you to see maybe some of the blind spots you're not seeing. It's that reflective component that I think is so important. And really, the takeaway from that episode, I hope for all of you, was find your business bestie, someone that asks you to rise and reminds you of your magic. And you really, 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 really need that as a solopreneur. Because again, we were not meant to do this alone. You need to find your people. And if you haven't listened to that episode, I challenge go I offer it back to go back and listen, because it was really important, I think, in today's world where entrepreneurship, and again, particularly solopreneurship, you can be sitting behind that desk by yourself, and you may not, if your business is online, you may not talk to anybody. And having the courage to find those people who actually promote creativity, inspiration, and again, ask you to rise and see actually often the goodness in you that you maybe don't see, is finding that business bestie. So maybe in this episode, tag your business bestie and let us know who they are and give them a little shout out for what they do, because that is an, I believe, an essential part of entrepreneurship, is finding that business bestie. And I would have never ever gone to ROI had Carrie not said to me, you need to go now. I would have waited, and there isn't one in 2026. Would have had to have waited till 2027. And she was right. I needed to go. I needed to do it. Whether it was, even though it was hard, it was better than I ever could have imagined. And then if we flip to another one of our guests, we chatted with Rose Napoleon from Montreal, Quebec, and we all of these further guests down. Carrie, I didn't meet at ROI. I knew before, but every other guest I met at ROI. And I loved meeting Rose, one, because then it was another Canadian, because there wasn't very many of us there. And I loved our conversation because we really discussed values and how they lead growth. You know, Rose's skill is so essential to business owners, building your business from abundance and not urgency. And pause for that, hear that again. You want to build your business from abundance, not from urgency. Urgency doesn't work. I'm sorry. Coming from that wholehearted, abundant feeling, and abundant doesn't have to mean like there's $1 million cash in the bank yet. And I say yet. But maybe it comes from a place of abundance of energy exchange, abundance in what you're calling in. And urgency really is the fear, and abundance is really the aligned work. Rose's conversation was so good about core values and the importance of core values. And it came up over and over, almost unintentionally, the entire season. And I love that. Don't dismiss doing the work on your core values. This is a great time of year to do a little reflection on your core values. They can evolve, they don't have to stay the same. And it's it really, when we look at those core values, we look at what feels right in alignment to who we are and how we are evolving, we really then actually can grow in our businesses. And I think the takeaway from that was bold entrepreneurship begins with knowing your core values and aligning your decisions with them. Let those core values be your filter for everything you do in your business, and then you stay in alignment. It's so good. I love that conversation with Rose, and I'm so grateful that I met her. The next one, we kind of like dug in deep, and it was really interesting when this episode actually launched. So the things you don't always know behind the scenes, or kind of like I like to say, like the divine timing. But my interview with Dr. Julie Shaw from Hello, I'm Grieving, we talked about the hard topic of grief, and grief changes us, and that it's not a bad thing. And if I can share, when this episode launched, my own family, we were dealing actually with some pretty heavy grief. And I actually sent Dr. Julie a message that day just saying, hey, interesting, this is going to release today. Grateful for the conversation, but here's what is happening for us right now. And I felt just such a connection when I connected with Dr. Julie. Funny enough, we were supposed to connect at ROI, and that connection actually didn't happen until after we all got home. So I believe, again, when you're living in those core values and in alignment, the right people come to you. When you're looking to serve that greater good, they're not going to find you. And I'm so grateful that Dr. Julie and I were able to have this conversation. Not always an easy conversation, but I think an important one. And I think for me, what the takeaway from that episode really was that grief and success can coexist. And that's sometimes a hard thing to reconcile, is how can I be going through grief, but still like looking at, how am I achieving success in areas of my life? And, making space for our pain expands our leadership capacity. Anybody, I believe, anybody living life is going to have love and they're going to have loss. And with loss comes grief. And it can look different, but every human is going to experience it at some point in their lives. And it doesn't have to um, stop our success. But I think what it does is it has to, it stops us to find presence. And grief is a very, it has its own unique journey for each of us, and it ebbs and flows. I can say that for certain. And when we actually start talking about it, I think is actually where we get to release a little bit of it. And I just actually circle back a little off topic, not from this season, but I just saw something recently, and I believe it was Bruce Willis's wife, and she was speaking about grief, and she was talking about caretaking for a loved one, as he's got in an advanced stage of disease. And she said, as the caretaker or as the family member, all I really want is to be able to speak about it. And speaking about our grief sometimes is just a way to release it from us. And when if we're holding it in, it actually can turn. I think it kind of settles into the body in a not great way. But Dr. Julie is doing such great things in this world, and I know, again, a conversation that isn't always easy to have, but is also important to have. And I really loved our conversation, and I loved our connection. The next, then, we talked with Dr. Dana Lee Bagley, and she's from another Canadian. She's from Halifax, Nova Scotia. We talked about burnout boundaries and brave workspaces. And Dr. Dana was at ROI, and I actually didn't again meet her there. I actually sent her a message after, and she was sort of in the little like Shark Tank at ROI pitching her idea, and she won. And so proud of her and her vision. And really what with Dr. Dana was really that, burnout was not, it's not a badge of honor. And the work she is doing to ensure that leaders are leading from a place that we aren't promoting burnout, and we're not really, putting a gold star on working towards burnout, is so important. And being now for her to be able to expand that and get that out into the greater world of helping a greater population is so key. And I think, for me with Dr. Dana too, what stood out is because she was a clinical psychologist for a very long time, working in the healthcare system, being able to now branch out this into entrepreneurship, one, is super brave because it is very opposite to what her world and what she has known. And two, it's really expanding a skill set for her with the entrepreneurship side, and then really being able to apply that incredible skill as a therapist, as a psychologist. And she's really just doing great work. And I think the takeaway for me from that one was really that boundaries and self-regulation are essential in thriving leadership, especially for women. And really, if we go down that one a little bit more, is, women and single moms. And we often, boundaries sometimes get such a bad rap. And I know like everyone has a different thought on boundaries. And I know, not everyone actually likes to hear the word boundary, but boundaries really are our way to self-regulate. And our boundaries, we have boundaries with ourselves every day. Like, I have a boundary with my, like, I can't eat chocolate all day. I'd love to. Wouldn't feel very good, and I'd probably gain a ton of weight, and I would really not feel good. But there's like a cause and effect. But the like, there's some self-regulation in like, okay, I can have a one piece of chocolate rather than eating, 20 chocolate bars. And those are boundaries. And so when we think of them as just, those are the thresholds or the lines that for ourselves that keep us well. Another boundary might be like, my phone goes, people are always amazed at this. One of my work boundaries is my phone notifications get turned off at 9 p.m. and they don't come back on until 7:30 a.m. Now, I'm not in bed in all of those hours, but what it is these are just you, and I am not accessible. The only ones who can get through are my immediate family. And that's a boundary. That's just a choice for me that I don't, no one as a coach or as a Pilates teacher, nobody else needs to get me between those hours. Those hours can be mine, and that's okay. So I think there's a lot of power in the boundaries and creating that self-regulation so that we really recognize when we're leaning towards burnout. And yes, I highly recommend checking out Dr. Dana and all the great things she's doing. We'll leave all of again our we'll leave all of our guests on this season's contact in the show notes for you. And then we had Dr. Hannah Jimenez, and this was also another one of my favorite, was hers talking about leading with courage and integrity. Oh, I thought such a timely conversation in the world today. I thought it was, we were talking about how leadership is about unlocking potential and not power. And I think that like really brought a lens to leadership. And again, I think, this is also something we don't talk about is, how to lead. Not just like I got to a leadership role or being intentional about leadership. And Dr. Hannah's work that she's doing in leadership, the world needs now more than ever. And, conscious leadership begins with authenticity. We talked a lot about integrity and equity in yourself, but also in your systems. And what I really loved with Dr. Hannah was talking about, again, we talked about core values in this episode. We talked about how when we look at ourselves, we've got to get it right with ourselves first before we're going to be able to lead on that higher, greater level. And Dr. Hannah's just doing some incredible things, and she's had such vast experiences, and how she is coaching leaders and what she's asking them to consider today in today's world, I think are so important and so necessary that we've all got to think about that. And we said in that episode, we continue to talk about in leadership, is that we really have to, I think, be mindful about who we're leading, how we want to lead, and how does it align with us as individuals to a greater good. Again, we're not meant to do it alone. And even in leadership, you can be the leader, but you're not doing it alone. No one gets to those positions by themselves. They've all had, they've climbed up a ladder with groups of individuals who've supported them along the way, whether that be a corporate or entrepreneurship, in both. But I really love that. So definitely check out Dr. Hannah. And then, we had some solo episodes. We talked about gratitude, we talked about burnout, we talked about harmony, and we talked about leadership. And this was why I like to do the solo episode after an interview, is that it allows us to go deep and get real. We explore what it means, what those topics mean. Leadership, for example, was like, what does it mean to lead from the inside out? Burnout, how do we redefine balance? And how do we honor who we are? And, I think also just giving ourselves permission that, harmony will balance us. Harmony actually is more achievable ever than balance. For me, like harmony resonated far more than balance, and we're much happier in harmony than we are definitely in burnout. And then reminding ourselves to be grateful, whether you're listening, you're in Canada or the U.S. or wherever you are in the season of Thanksgiving, even though they don't align. We, giving the opportunity to be grateful and reminding ourselves that having a gratitude practice is so important. And we probably don't give enough time to gratitude. And I think, if even as we get into these final days and weeks of 2025, it's being grateful for the year we've had. And I know that I'm so grateful for all of you. Um, and I would love to know what your favorite episode was. Who was your favorite guest? What was your takeaway? Let us know in the comments below. And then as we kind of bring it all together, what did season 2 teach us? Well, for me, every guest brought their own arc, and yet there were so many common threads that continued to emerge. Leading from values, not trends, not ego. That one came up almost in every episode. I think, again, prioritizing the inner work alongside our outer growth. It is. We have to do the inner stuff first. That's where we will grow. And then again, the role of community in the hive in helping all of us rise. We were not meant to do it alone. We need each other. And when one rises, we all rise. And really, the ARC Hive is not just a podcast, it's a movement. And you are part of it by listening to these episodes and showing up. And it wouldn't be a true episode if I didn't leave you with a little journal prompt, a little reflection. And I think at this time of year, it really just brings it on for all of us. But so get out your pens if you're driving, think about it or write it down later. But what is your biggest personal or professional growth moment this season? And how are you bringing that lesson into this next chapter? Leave me a comment, send me a DM. I would love to hear, because I think we also have to take that moment to acknowledge how far we've come. Another year has passed, and I promise most of us are not the same as we were at the start of the year as we are today. And as life continues to tick by, and sometimes at a incredible speed, I think it's important to reflect on how far we've come and celebrate that. And I just want to say thank you to each and every guest, every listener, and every voice that made up season 2 and what it was. Could not do this without the incredible willingness of guests to show up and share their story, have the courage to share their story. And to you, the listeners, having, really taking the time to listen and hear their stories, because there's so much goodness this season, and there is goodness in this world, and I love being able to showcase that. And hey, what's up for season 3? Well, we're going to take a little break. I'm not going to lie. We're going to take a little break until probably February 2026. But season 3, we're coming in with some new topics. We're coming in with some deeper dives, but we're coming in with more real stories that we can share and learn together. So I just wanted to say thank you again. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting us be in your ear. And hopefully, this season has prompted you and been a little thought provoking and engaging and inspiring, because there's been so many incredible women on this season who've shared their stories, and they are doing incredible things, and so are you. So I would love for you, if there's one takeaway or one ask I have, tag a friend who needs this hive in their life today. Let us go into this next season not doing it alone. Let's just remove that from our mindset that we have to do it alone. let's go into 2026 with the collective and the collaborative of the hive coming together. So tag a friend who needs this hive in their life, and let's continue working together to support more love, more joy, more connection in 2026. Not to worry, there's a couple more bonus episodes coming before we sign off for the year, but I really wanted to just reflect on this season because there was so many great conversations. So thank you so much for joining us, and I can't wait to see you back here very soon.